Hi folks, my name is Linda Emmett and welcome to Happiness is an Inside Job. We are the creators of our own reality, we create our own lives. Our mind is our biggest limit and it's our own beliefs, behaviours and habits constantly caught in those cycles that keep us trapped where we are and stand in the way of our own happiness. So throughout this podcast, we're going to take a deep dive into some of those beliefs, habits and patterns, where they show up in your lives and what you can do to change them. Hi folks, on this week's podcast we're going to dive into bad or dark thoughts. It was actually watching a Ricky Gervais show on Netflix. It was one of the specials that gave me the inspo for this podcast. It really got me thinking about, the darker side of our psyche, our darker thoughts that we deem bad and how we treat ourselves because of them. And like in reality, within our absolutely beautiful, amazing being that we are all things. We have all thoughts, but we also within our thoughts have choices in everything. Choices in how we behave, choices in how we show up, choices in how we live our lives, how we treat others, how and who we are in the world. They're all our choices. We are wonderful human beings with amazing potential. But because we have a conscious mind and an egoic mind, we also have ridiculous rules that we have ourselves to be. They're tied into our self-image, who we believe we should be, how we should be. This image, this picture we have of ourselves that we set years ago of who we're supposed to be. And a lot of the time it has unattainable, unrealistic standards to how a human actually is and how life unfolds or happens around us and to us a lot of the time. And we have this very, very black and white view about what makes us a good person. We are either a good person or a bad person. And that is so untrue. Now, of course, there's people that live extraordinary good lives, filled with contribution and giving and everything else, that have dedicated their lives to many, many things, many beautiful, amazing things, charities, all of this beautiful, wonderful stuff. There are people that have dedicated their lives to being vile, murdering, doing horrible, heinous things. But within every human being are all things, are good emotions, good experiences, bad experiences, everything that makes us up. And I know life would be a lot cleaner if it was more black and white and we were just good or bad. But there are very much times for all of us within our lives, and if we haven't done it, we've certainly seen it, where good people, I'm using quote marks there, do bad things. We can treat people very badly at times. We can do bad acts. There's many, many things in many, many ways. That doesn't take away from who you are or who you're trying to be. We do things through grief, anger, rage, hurt, relationship breakdowns, job losses, fear. Fear drives a huge amount of our darker acts. But we decide that you're either good or bad. And we tell ourselves what we need to be through our self-image. We have to be, slim, healthy, smart, kind, giving, self-sacrificing to a biblical level, loving, supportive, a great friend, a great listener, all of these things. And whatever else you all throw into your own mix to be a good person. That's an absolutely monstrous weight that we put on ourselves, and it stops us showing up as who we truly are. It stops us allowing ourselves to be weak, angry, hurt, upset, grieving, pissed off, any of these things. Because then in our minds, with our self-image, that's outside of self-image, we're allowed to be. And this puts us in the bad person category. This is when we start punishing ourselves and telling ourselves we're bad. It's not okay for us to be depressed or unhappy or sad, anxious, stressed. None of those things, because that doesn't fit in with the beautiful self-image we have. And not only is that not allowed, but if we're being completely honest, we're not even allowed have bad or dark thoughts. And we all have them. We all have those thoughts that after the moment that thought just comes in. You're standing in front of someone, I don't know, maybe it's a boss or someone like that, and you're standing having a conversation about work or whatever, and that thought comes in and goes, wonder what would happen if I just cracked him a loaf in the head right now. And you picture it, you see his head just going bang backwards. And 2 seconds later, you're going, oh my God, I got fired, can't believe I thought that, oh my God. And fear and all this crap. And then you start telling yourself, what a bad person if people only knew, if he knew I thought that. All of these things, it was a thought. A thought. We can sometimes think really, really dark things, depending on what's going on. Our thoughts also test our limits. There's a huge difference between thinking something and actually acting it out. That's emotional control. And there was something I heard years ago, and it didn't sit well with me, if I'm honest. What's the difference between someone who commits a murder and someone who doesn't? Emotional control. And it's not that we don't all think of it at times, or we don't all have the capacity within us to commit a murder or violence or any heinous acts against another human being. We all have the potential. You set up the circumstances right, and the potential is certainly there. What it comes down to is choice and emotional control. How we can find other ways to manage our emotions. How we can sometimes think those thoughts, feel that rage, feel that anger, and not act it out. Now, I know, of course, there's different, different tendencies. There's sociopath, psychopath, narcissist, all of these things. But a lot of the time, people that commit crimes, murder, violence, all of these things, it actually comes out of it. People murder more people they know than they don't. And a lot of that comes from our lack of emotional control. And it's a reaction, it's a response to rage in the moment. And that is very, very, very different to us having thoughts about these things sometimes. I mean, and sometimes these thoughts come up out of nowhere. Sometimes you'll have a dark thought and nobody's done anything on you. Do you know what I mean? There might be, a really bold kid that's running amok in the supermarket, and the party goes, I'd love to give him a slap. And then you're going in your head, oh my God, that's a child. How could I think such heinous things? You didn't do it. You heard noise that was irritating. It triggered something in you that you felt irritated, a little bit angry. You thought, oh, this is what I do in that situation. It's a thought. It doesn't make us a dark, bad person. It's just thoughts we're having, but we can punish ourselves so much for having those thoughts. We can feel deep shame about the way we're thinking and not own up to the fact that we all think these things. Like, I remember, and going back years ago, like, this used to happen to me. I was always very physically active, and I'd go out on walks every day, and sometimes I'd be walking down the road and I can't even recall what I'd be thinking about, if I'm honest. And I get this thought in my head that I go, what if you walked out in front of that lorry coming down here? Now, I wouldn't be suicidal. I wouldn't be particularly depressed that I knew about, or any of those things. But that fleeting thought would come in and absolutely terrify me. What I know now is, one, I had a huge amount of repressed emotions going on that I wasn't even aware of. I had no awareness around them. And every time I felt emotions, my thoughts were reacting to it. And sometimes we just have these thoughts, and it's our own mind testing our boundaries. It's our own mind reminding us of our capabilities, capacities, and the fact that we don't do these things. We don't, just because we have a thought about doing a particular thing doesn't mean we're going to act it out. But we can often define ourselves by the thoughts we have. We have dark thoughts that makes us a dark, bad person. If you live there, it's not healthy. If you're living in dark thoughts, it can drive, of course, depression. It can drive, mental illness. All of these things. It can drive anxiety, all of these things. But even anxiety itself, it comes from not trusting yourself. Not trusting yourself comes from the thoughts that you're having, fear-driven thoughts. And those fear-driven thoughts, with anxiety, I've seen with clients where they have a thought where they do say, I want to harm myself in some way, shape or form. That thought frightens the life out of them, which drives the anxiety in their system because they don't trust themselves enough to know they won't do it. It is just a thought. Our thoughts only have the power that we give them. It's when we dive into stories with these thoughts, when we get carried away with these thoughts and play into them, that ignites our fears around them. It's like, if you have a thought about, as I say one of my clients and they have a suicidal thought. They're feeling extremely anxious and they get that feeling, what if I just ended it all? What if I took that knife? What if I took those tablets? These things are very, very different. These are an escape response. Your mind is looking for ways to get you out of that situation. It doesn't necessarily mean you're suicidal. It means your mind is looking for escape. And it will find to it the quickest route. And sometimes our own thoughts can really shock us and frighten us. But if we get carried away with it and start going, oh my God, what if I do that heinous act one day? What if I do, slap that kid in the head or, steal the neighbour's dog or whatever it is? What if I carry out that act? That's when you start buying into your stories. Your thoughts are not true. They're not real. They only, as I say, come from the power that we give them. And the ones we power up, we create patterns with. If we're constant, and these catch us in loops then. And we have these thought patterns driving this fear, driving this lack of worth, and driving this lack of trust within ourselves to the point where you're so terrified that you think you're going to do something that you created from one thought. So it's recognizing, as I say, that our thoughts aren't real. The stories we play out in our heads aren't real. And allowing yourself, because what we often do is, we beat ourselves up with a shame shovel for, as I say, for having thoughts. Now, Ricky Gervais, when I was watching him, his take on it was, we've all been standing on the train station platform and seeing someone close to the edge and just for a millisecond went, what would happen if I pushed them? It's the thought. It's not, you're not going to rock over and just randomly push someone off the platform, we hope. But that's just a thought. That doesn't make you a bad person. The choices you make from that thought, the actions you take from that thought and the behaviours you have, that's who you are. How you respond from them is who you are, not the thoughts you have. And allowing yourself and catching them, telling yourself they're not real, taking away their power. That stops you, A, living in a shame spiral, a hailstorm of your own worry and fear. And it starts you taking back the power that you have. Another space that it shows up hugely is within our sexual fantasies. When we're thinking of sex, we'll all look for things that test our boundaries. In our lives, in our day-to-day lives, we're so strict with ourselves. We have all these unattainable standards, goals, how we communicate, how we should communicate, being polite, being nice, being kind, being good. And that's perfect. That's how we all want to be. That's pretty normal. But we put unattainable standards on ourselves that we have to show up that way all the time. And, in our sexual fantasies, this is where our mind tests our boundaries. This is a place where we can think out and act out those things that we possibly never do in our day-to-day lives. But it is a space that you can get turned on, get excited, feel desire, feel yearning, think those thoughts, create those pictures and stories of what you'd act out. It's thoughts. It's a story you're creating to create an emotion. That's all it is. And we can hammer ourselves for our sexual desires, for the thoughts that we're thinking, the fantasies that we're creating. It's a fantasy you're building in your mind. It doesn't mean that we're going to go out and act these things out. You're not going to, hop up off your bed or wherever and go in and steal your neighbour's chihuahua and, do you know what I mean? Do these things, whatever floats your boat. You are just creating a fantasy in your mind. And as I say, our fantasies push our boundaries. They're things we won't or don't act out in our lives. That's why they're fantasies. That's why we allow ourselves push our boundaries. It's where we become as creative, express parts of ourselves that we don't allow ourselves express. Maybe it's express anger, maybe it's express dominance, maybe it's to be submissive. We don't allow ourselves be that in our lives. Maybe it's to be vulnerable. Whatever it is, they're fantasies we're acting out to get to a place, to create something nice in our body, to create an orgasm. There's no wrong in that, but it's hammering yourself and shaming yourself and guilting yourself for having those fantasies and telling yourself that's bad and telling yourself that's super dark or that's a measure of who you are. That's where we create the problems for ourselves, for not allowing ourselves to have these things. We need to move out these unattainable standards we have for ourselves that, make us a good person. We can view things very black and white. Life is grey. It's messy, it's chaos at times, it's ever flowing like a river. It's moving, changing, ebbing, flowing. Sometimes we may hit a bit of a waterfall, a rock. So other times we've a steady flow, and it's the same for our emotions flowing through our system. Our feelings are depending on what's going on, what's happening in our lives. We may have darker thoughts, angrier thoughts, happier thoughts, joyous thoughts, but that's the makeup of who we are. And as I say, there's a huge difference in what we think and who we are in the world, and accepting that we're grey, we are all things. And fear drives a number of our thoughts, a number of our darker thoughts fear drives. So if you're getting caught in cycles and you're spiraling and you're beating yourself with the shame shovel, look at the fear you have. Behind the fear there's lack, something you believe you're lacking in. And that tends to be where these patterns are stemming from. But other than that, unless it's really harming you in your life, it's allowing yourself to have those thoughts. You have boundaries on yourself in your external world around people. All your thoughts are sometimes doing is testing your boundaries or giving you a little escape. It's not real. So let yourself off the hook. Enjoy the fantasies. Allow yourself, when you feel that negative or dark thought about anyone or anything, feel it for what it is. Think it. Let it go then and let yourself off the hook. So that's it for me for this week, guys. I hope you really enjoyed it and got some fabulous takeaways. And as always, I invite you to connect in with me across social media or check me out on my website, www.yourgifttoyou.com, or email me, linda@yourgifttoyou.com, guys, because I'd love to hear from you and any topics you'd like for us to talk about or any more learnings that you want. And please remember, give me those reviews because it keeps the podcast getting out there to more people. So chat to you very soon, guys. Bye-bye.